Karratha is a town in the far north of Western Australia that experienced one of the most dramatic property booms in Australian history, followed by one of the most painful busts. At the peak, ordinary houses in this remote town were selling for more than $1 million and renting for thousands of dollars a week. Then iron ore prices fell, and the whole thing came crashing down. Today we tell the story of Karratha, and the timeless lessons it holds for anyone tempted by a resources town. First, let's set the scene. Karratha sits in the Pilbara region, the beating heart of Australia's iron ore industry. This is the area that digs up the iron ore that gets shipped to make much of the world's steel. During the great mining investment boom, roughly from the mid-2000s to around 2013, demand for iron ore exploded, prices soared, and the mining companies poured enormous investment into the region. They needed workers, and lots of them. Tens of thousands of people flooded into Pilbara towns like Karratha to take high-paying mining jobs. Now think about what that does to a small, remote property market. You have a sudden, massive wave of well-paid workers all needing somewhere to live, in a town that simply did not have enough housing for them. The result was extraordinary. Property prices in Karratha soared to levels that rivaled and even exceeded major capital cities. Houses that would be modest in any southern city were selling for 7 figures. Rents were astronomical, because mining companies were willing to pay almost anything to house their workers. For a few years, this remote town in the desert had some of the most expensive property in the entire country. It felt, to those living through it, like it would never end. But it always ends. Around 2013 and 2014, the mining boom shifted from its investment and construction phase into its production phase. This is the crucial turning point that resources town investors so often forget. Building a mine requires enormous numbers of workers. Running a mine, once it is built, requires far fewer. As the giant construction projects were completed, the demand for workers dropped sharply. At the same time, iron ore prices fell from their extraordinary highs. The flood of workers reversed into an exodus. And just like that, the demand that had propped up Karratha's property market evaporated. The consequences were brutal. Property values in Karratha fell dramatically from their peak, with some homes losing a huge share of their value. Investors who had bought near the top, believing the boom was permanent, were left holding properties worth a fraction of what they paid, in a town with far fewer buyers. Rents collapsed as the worker demand faded. The people who had treated a volatile mining town like a guaranteed gold mine learned an extremely expensive lesson about the nature of boom and bust. Now, here is the nuance that makes these towns so seductive and so dangerous. Even after the crash, Karratha often posts high rental yields. Because property prices fell so far while rents remained supported by the workers who do stay, the income return relative to the low purchase price can look very attractive on paper. A yield well above what you would get in a capital city. This is the siren song of the mining town. It lures investors in with the promise of high income. But that high yield comes with a hidden danger. If the underlying property value keeps falling, or fails to recover, the strong rental income can be quietly offset, or even wiped out, by capital losses. Collecting a high yield while your asset slowly loses value is not the win it appears to be. So can Karratha boom again? Possibly. The Pilbara still produces a vast amount of iron ore, and there is ongoing activity in the region, including newer developments in areas like energy and other minerals. If a fresh wave of major investment arrives, Karratha could see another upswing. But this is precisely the point. The town's fortunes are tied to forces almost entirely outside the control of any individual property owner. Global commodity prices. Decisions made in the boardrooms of giant mining companies. Demand for steel in distant countries. An investor in Karratha is, whether they admit it or not, making a bet on all of those things. So what are the lessons for anyone considering a resources town? 3 principles, and they are hard rules, not suggestions. First, understand the difference between the construction phase and the production phase of a mining project. The construction phase creates the jobs and the demand. The production phase needs far fewer people. Many investors buy during the exciting construction phase and get caught when it ends. Second, never treat a high rental yield as a reason to ignore capital risk. In a volatile town, the yield can be a trap that distracts you from a falling asset value. Third, never make a resources town a core part of your portfolio. If you choose to take the bet, it should be a small, deliberate slice that you can afford to lose, not the foundation of your wealth. Karratha is the story of the Australian mining boom written in property prices. Spectacular highs, brutal lows, and a powerful reminder that no boom lasts forever. The towns that rise the fastest on a single commodity are the same towns that fall the hardest when it turns. Respect that, and you will never be the investor caught at the top. If you found this useful, hit subscribe, because we break down a different Australian property market and town every few days. See you in the next one. It is worth dwelling on why intelligent people keep getting caught by mining towns, because the trap is psychological as much as financial. During a boom, the returns are so spectacular that they overwhelm caution. People see neighbors making fortunes, they see rents that seem impossible, and they convince themselves that this time is different, that this boom has further to run. The very strength of the boom is what makes the eventual bust so damaging, because it draws in the most money at the highest prices, right before the turn. The antidote is to remember that the size of a boom is not evidence of its durability. Often it is the opposite. The most violent booms in single commodity towns are frequently the ones followed by the most violent busts.